Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. As an avid hiker and outdoor enthusiast, I'm always seeking new trails and parks to explore on weekends. So when I heard about a remote mountain area several hours north with challenging terrain and beautiful scenic overlooks, I couldn't wait to check it out. Early one sunny Saturday morning, equipped with my backpack, hiking boots, and naive excitement, I set out to conquer the trail. The windy highway took me farther from civilization than I'd expected, but soon I was lacing up my boots at the quiet, empty trailhead, not another soul in sight. Consulted my map one last time and set off uphill into the dense forest. Right away, the solitude and stillness enthralled me, broken only by a birdsong high in the towering pines. The incline was indeed steep and the trail sometimes tricky to follow, but with youthful energy I powered higher, stopping occasionally to sip water and admire the expanding views. After several strenuous hours, I reached the ridge overlooking a valley of patchwork farmland. I found a sunny rock to perch on and eat a snack, transfixed by the scenic panorama below. Rested and refueled, I ventured further, eager to press on deeper into the remote range. On mid-afternoon, though, the terrain leveled off, and the thrill of discovery dwindled. Consulting my map, I decided to turn around and start heading back while there was ample daylight. As I looped back downward, shadows stretched and light faded faster than expected. No longer energized by the uphill challenge, my legs ached severely on the descent. I cursed myself for straying so far into an unfamiliar place. Just as the last sunlight began filtering through the sparse branches, I paused and realized with alarm that I could no longer spot the trailhead ahead through the trees. Panicked, I quickened my pace, watching the ground to follow what remained of the overgrown trail. That's when I first heard it. A strange, heavy crunching noise in the brush somewhere to my right. I halted, holding my breath, and listened intently until it faded. Probably just a deer or turkey rustling, I told myself. But as I continued down the dusky path, the odd crunching just off in the shadows kept pace with me. I quickened further, heart pounding, hoping to spot the access road in my car ahead. But the woods only seemed to thicken as dusk settled in. The bizarre rustling continued, too loud for my rationalizations. When it was joined by the snapping of branches, I froze in my tracks. Is someone there? I called out weakly, peering into the gloom between the trees. Only silence followed. I hurried on, the ominous sounds intensifying along with my horror. Dirt gave way suddenly to loose rocks, and I lost my footing, cutting my hand. The grating noises closed in through the darkness as I scrambled to regain the trail. Then the worst came. An inhuman cry held out somewhere behind me, guttural and savage. My mind screamed bear, but some primal instinct within me whispered otherwise. I took off running recklessly over the treacherous ground. The unnerving wails pursued me as my heart hammered wildly. Lungs burning, I realized I had to make a choice or collapse from exhaustion. Veering sharply, I left the marked path and crashed through the underbrush, hoping to throw off my invisible pursuer. Thorns and branches tore at my skin and clothes, but I didn't slow. Just when I felt my legs giving out, I stumbled into a moonlit clearing. An abandoned ranger tower stood ahead, illuminating the access road beyond it. Summoning my last sliver of energy, I sprinted desperately for the structure. Slamming the splintered wooden door shut behind me, I scrambled up the tower steps two at a time. The animalistic shrieks and footsteps followed close behind before ceasing abruptly as I reached the top platform. Shaking violently, I peered out into the night through cracked windows, but saw no signs of what had stalked me. For over an hour, I huddled there in the dilapidated tower, too afraid to move. When silence persisted, I finally descended cautiously to the roadway. The trek back to my car drained the last of my energy. I collapsed into the driver's seat and sped recklessly down the desolate gravel road, praying I was headed toward civilization. Miles down the lonesome highway, the first faint light of a filling station appeared like a mirage. I pulled in and banged on the locked doors until the sleepy attendant emerged and called the police. But when they arrived, they found no evidence of anyone or anything lurking in the woods. Likely just a coyote chasing prey, they shrugged. I knew what I'd heard and felt, and it was no coyote. but nothing could compel me to return and prove it. I still live in fear recalling that harrowing night, the pure primal terror of being pursued through the darkness by something so human yet so inhuman. While I'll never know what malevolent entity stalked me in that desolate forest, the memory of its otherworldly cries will haunt me forever. I've learned nature's beauty conceals horrors we can scarcely comprehend. Now I keep to well-marked trails close to civilization, wary of the wicked things that watch and wait in the wilderness shadows. Surviving by finally listening to my deepest gut instincts was my only salvation. But I'll never again dismiss the ominous legends that warn to stay clear of certain remote places hidden well for good reason. My younger brother Ethan and I have made hiking together a beloved tradition on sunny weekends for years now. We both have increasingly hectic work schedules lately, so these woodland adventures are our dedicated standing date to catch up without any distractions or obligations. Just quality bonding time, enjoying nature and each other's company. I always eagerly look forward to our regular excursions, even when his stubborn enthusiasm leads us on questionable detours. So when Ethan called me excitedly describing a spectacular new riverside trail he was determined to tackle, I gladly marked my calendar for that upcoming Saturday. This spot was nearly 2 hours away deep in remote countryside, he explained, but promised the scenic sweeping views and secluded waterfall finale would make it well worth the drive. While the distance gave me pause, I trusted Ethan's judgment and adventurous spirit. We have navigated worse scrapes together before. I packed light day packs with water and trail mix, while Ethan created a nostalgic road trip playlist, just like old times. At sunrise, we hit the road, singing along tunelessly and reminiscing about childhood vacations as the city faded to rolling farmland. It felt comforting to leave the stresses of adulthood behind for the day. After the last hour passed along increasingly narrow, twisting back roads, we finally arrived at the unmarked trailhead. I was taken aback to find only a weathered homemade wooden sign half concealed in the weeds marking the path entrance. No park office, map kiosk, or another soul around. The modest dirt track looked only semi-maintained, with encroaching grass and weeds lining the edges. But Ethan was already halfway up the trail, too eager to begin our adventure. So against my better judgment, I followed, making a mental note of the parking area's location so we could easily find our way back. At first, the hiking was pleasantly scenic and mild as we ambled along the wide river's mossy edge. But gradually the route narrowed and markers grew infrequent, with overgrown forks splitting the trail unexpectedly. We continued onward, trusting Ethan's shaky internal compass, joking about our woeful navigation skills. After a couple hours with no waterfall or obvious turnaround point, though, I gently suggested we start looping back in case weather rolled in. And right on cue, we felt the first fat raindrops filtering through the leafy canopy. I pragmatically started mapping our exit strategy in my head, but stubborn Ethan dismissed the sprinkle as a passing shower, insisting the prize must be close. As the skies rapidly darkened and the drizzle accelerated into a downpour, I had to raise my voice over the din of water pummeling leaves that we needed to take shelter somewhere. Ethan begrudgingly agreed to finally a turn, muttering under his breath. The hard rainfall made the path exponentially harder to follow, flooding ruts and obscuring hazards with fallen debris. We trudged on swiftly side by side, hoping to spot the gravel lot through the trees just ahead. Heart quickening, I realized nothing looked familiar in the storm's chaos. When an unexpected fork emerged, Ethan immediately darted left, while I hesitantly thought I recalled coming right originally. But before I could call him back, he had slipped around the bend, playfully shouting he'd race me to the finish as a joke. With no choice but to continue tracking him, I trailed behind, moving as quickly as I could, mentality scolding myself for letting him get so far ahead. Nearly an hour later, I finally arrived back at the vacant, muddy parking area, but found Ethan still nowhere in sight. I walked the tree line, screaming his name at the top of my lungs, peering anxiously into the dark mouth of the forest. Only the pounding rain echoed back. Fearing Ethan was hurt or hopelessly lost, I decided I had to try retracing our steps, using my pocket knife to mark trees so as not to also disappear. The intense weather made navigating the indistinct path extremely challenging. Several times I took wrong turns and hit dead ends, forcing me to double back after long stretches. I cried out Ethan's name with mounting hysteria, imagining the worst. As I neared the fork where we had separated, I tripped over a moss-covered fallen log and face-planted into the soupy mud. Glancing up, I noticed a scrap of bright red fabric snagged on a thorny bush nearby. I scrambled over on hands and knees towards it. There dangling from the brambles was Ethan's torn jacket. Below it lay Ethan himself, unconscious and curled beneath a massive oak, obscured partially by the underbrush lining the trail. Terror gripped me as I frantically shook him awake, dazed and disoriented. Besides minor scrapes and bruises, he seemed miraculously all right, but he had zero recollection of how he came to be there or of striking his head on the formidable tree trunk. Overwhelming relief washed over me as I supported his weight on my shoulder and slowly steered us out of the dense, ominous woods before darkness fully descended. Finally safe inside the locked vehicle with hot air blasting, I helped Ethan change into dry spare clothes and inspected his worrisome head wound closer under the dome light. He still couldn't conjure up any memories post our separation at the fateful fork, now hours ago. I chose not to mention finding his shredded jacket inexplicably abandoned far out of reach above him. No need to trouble him further today. I still don't fully understand what transpired that stormy day after we diverged on the trail. Ethan seems convinced he likely just lost footing in the mud and hit his head in the fall. But discomfort lingers in me like puzzle pieces still missing. Why didn't he call out for me? What tore his jacket violently halfway up that tree? Some questions are better left unanswered, I've learned. While immensely grateful Ethan was all right in the end, that chilling day remains a haunting memory I wish I could erase. I learned nature's tranquility disguises dangers once you abandon the beaten path. Now I'm going to trust my inner voice when it whispers caution, rather than ignore reason to follow others blindly into peril. Out there alone, we have only each other for protection. Next time, I will stand firm and demand Ethan stay within sight until we're back to the security of the car. Our traumatic close call reinforced that sinister things move in the shadows, watching and waiting for the unwary. By the grace of God, this story had a happy ending against the odds. But the woods nearly swallowed my little brother whole, and I won't soon forget that. I'll never forget the early autumn weekend during 7th grade when my science class embarked on an overnight camping trip into New Hampshire's rugged White Mountains. It was late September, so we expected cool nights but no severe weather. Our teachers, Mr. James and Ms. Klein, chose a well-traveled trail up formidable Mount Washington, with a primitive campsite halfway up the steep mountainside. The ambitious plan was to hike up Saturday afternoon, spend the night in tents, then descend Sunday morning. 14 of us native students, ranging from 11 to 13 years old, met at sunrise in the school parking lot, lugging massive packs loaded down with camping gear. The usually boisterous bus ride was subdued, as the daunting challenge awaiting us sank in. We were soft suburban kids born and raised, woefully unprepared for true wilderness. But Mr. James' infectious, booming enthusiasm curbed our doubts. This would be a rite of passage, he promised, as the bus rattled farther from civilization towards the looming mountain range ahead. By midday, we finally arrived at the quiet, isolated trailhead, the end of the paved road. Lit only by rare shafts of autumn sunlight piercing the thick pines, the narrow dirt path disappeared mysteriously into the woods. We labored to hoist our cumbersome packs and lined up, worried but too excited to turn back now. At Mr. James' bellowing signal, we set off uphill single file into the forest, led by his cadence. That invigorating momentum rapidly faded as the unrelenting steep incline quickly taxed our underdeveloped stamina and lungs. The thinning mountain air elevation left us lightheaded and gasping. We were soon forced to take frequent rest stops, sprawled exhausted on boulders just to recuperate enough strength to continue. But the stunning surrounding autumn foliage and peak vibrant hues raised our spirits and camaraderie. Occasional glimpses of the sweeting valleys far below emerging through gaps in the trees reminded us our destination was near. By late afternoon, we finally stumbled upon the small, primitive clearing that would be base camp for the night. Nestled deep in the woods, it offered just enough room for our tiny two-person tents, circled haphazardly around a fire pit lined with rocks. We hurried to get settled before sunset, collecting armloads of firewood and struggling to pitch tents on the rocky ground as the teachers prepared a hearty, chilly dinner on the camp stove. Soon, we were all laughing and chatting around the crackling campfire, faces aglow toasting gooey marshmallows under a dazzling night sky burning with more stars than most of us had ever laid eyes on. Nothing seemed amiss in those blissful moments of camaraderie. But by 9 o'clock, utterly exhausted from the grueling uphill trek, we retreated to our nylon dome tents, cramming into the cozy spaces in pairs and threes. My tent mate Emma was out cold in mere minutes. But spent as I was, I lay wide awake, increasingly aware of the remote wilderness sounds enveloping us. Owls hooting ominously in the distance, trees creaking and groaning in the wind, the chill night breeze whistling eerily between distant craggy granite outcrops. Eventually I dozed off, lulled by the chorus, secure knowing the others were mere steps away in their tents. A blood-curdling scream ripped through the night, jolting me upright. Emma shot upright too, eyes round as saucers meeting mine in the darkness. The chilling shriek came again from somewhere deep in the dense woods beyond our camp, so raw and primal it turned my blood to ice. We huddled together motionless, listening intently as crashing and furious rustling followed, slowly approaching our tent. Heavy thudding footsteps trampled twigs and leaves, grunting menacingly mere feet away. Emma buried her face in my shoulder, trembling uncontrollably. Every instinct screamed to alert Mr. James, but some primal intuition warned making noise would draw the predator nearer. So we remained paralyzed, listening helplessly as the heavy footsteps steadily circled our tent, the massive shadowy form audibly brushing against the thin nylon walls sheltering us. Twigs and branches snapped under immense weight just outside. Just as I considered risking a desperate sprint to the teacher's tent, the ominous sound slowly retreated into the inky woods until only my pounding heart remained. Neither of us slept another moment that endless night, frozen by the chilling encounter. At daybreak, we finally erupted from our tent babbling about the bone-chilling sounds to the teachers through chattering teeth. But Mr. James casually dismissed it as a moose wandering near camp, nothing to get worked up about. Our classmates teased us for letting a big deer scare us silly, but deep down I knew no common animal could conjure such nightmarish cries that pierced my soul. Without evidence, though, we couldn't prove otherwise. On the hiking descent, I worked up the courage to ask Ms. Klein whether dangerous predators roamed these mountains that we should be alert for. She reluctantly confirmed occasional black bear sightings. When I nervously pressed further, she somberly admitted the native mountain lion population, albeit one that typically avoided humans when possible. My heart sank to my boots realizing what had likely stalked so close outside our tent all night. Now, over 20 years later, I still shudder remembering those chilling predator cries piercing the stillness, the thunderous footsteps encircling us. Our teachers meant well taking us into the majestic wilderness to build confidence and grit. But they led us blindly into the mountain lion's domain, utterly unprepared for the unseen horrors that darkness brings. Those haunting wails will stay seared in my memory forever, too feral and jarringly out of place for any civilized world. We escaped unscathed, but I know how easily things could have ended otherwise behind those fragile canvas walls. I learned true evil lurks camouflaged in the untamed wilds, emerging under the cloak of darkness to prey. We were spared by chance, but tempting fate is dangerous. Some nightmares cannot be unseen or unfelt once experienced. I gained newfound respect for the unfathomable dangers that wilderness can conceal, but also renewed gratitude for the safety of home, where light keeps darkness at bay. Our teachers hope to build resilience by plunging us naive students into the mountain's harsh realities. But there are some horrors that leave stings on the soul that never fully wash away. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.